Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Reefs Go Live. Today we will be diving into the hidden world of the reef to discover some of its cryptic creatures. They are animals that often go unnoticed but are really important for keeping the balance of the ocean. My name is Justine and I will be your topside host for today. We are broadcasting live from the vibrant waters of Little Cayman, and joining me on top of the boat today is our production team who can say a little hello to you right now. Hi guys! Thank you! Also joining us in our crew is our underwater explorer, Chandray. Now, she is wearing specialized diving gear to allow us to hear her. And she is going to help us get up close and personal with some of the cryptic creatures down there. Chandray, let's say hi to her now.
Hi everybody, and welcome to our second episode of Reefs Go Live. Now, it's not just me down here on the reef, but also a whole underwater team, and I'd love to give a special shout out to our safety diver Greg, and he is here to make sure that everything goes okay and there are no surprises. So, we are on a reef known as Richard's Reef here in Little Cayman. And on the reef there is a ton of cool little critters that are experts at hide and seek. So, you may not notice them at first glance, but that is okay, because our expert team down here with specialized underwater cameras are going to help us show you some of the cryptic creatures that live here.
Exactly, and we want you to join in the fun also. So, have you ever seen an animal that was so good at hiding you almost missed it? If so, you can now put some answers in the chat on your streaming platform that you're joining us with. So, also, whilst you're there, be sure to tell us who you are and where you're joining us from, and we'll read these out during the show. So, I'm sure that you all are more aware of some of the more charismatic creatures that we have on the reef, such as the sharks or the turtles, but there's so much more to discover down there. From the masters of disguise, like the scorpionfish or the flounder, to organisms that are so small they're almost microscopic. Today we will discover how some of these cryptic species can survive in the ocean's most competitive environments.
The way they survive are through certain adaptations. Now, these adaptations aren't just for fun, right? They help the cryptic creatures avoid being dinner for the next predator, and this helps keep control of the balance of life here on the reef. So, we'd like to explore these adaptations today. Justine, can you carry on for us?
Sure, so Chandray is going to show us some of these tiny but mighty creatures, which is a really good way of describing them, as some of these cryptic creatures, it's almost as if their adaptations that they have are superpowers. So here's a question for you. If you were one of these cryptic creatures on the reef, which superpower would you choose to have? Drop your answers in the chat, and whilst you're doing that, I'm going to read out some of the shout-outs to see who's joining us today. So we've already got some messages in already. Let's have a look to see who's here. So we have Bob from Hampton Roads, Virginia. We have Douglas from Westchester, Pennsylvania. We have Stephanie from Charleston, Oregon. We have Michael from Praia do Faro in Portugal, and I'm sure he's got a lot of friends with him as well. We have Cindy from South Carolina, Gary from Texas. We have Footsteps School in Grand Cayman, who are very excited to be watching after visiting the station last week. Thank you guys again for your visit, and we're glad that you're tuned in. Barbara from Italy, we have Medi from Spain, we have a Year 5 class from Spot Bay Primary School, we have Marie Martin Primary School Year 2 class and Year 5 class, Pedro from Portugal, Denise from New York, we have Karen from Chicago, Nancy from Vancouver, Alexandra from Barcelona. We have people from all over the world, even Andre Delpeche from South Africa, some more schools, Sir John A. Cumber Primary School Year 3 class. We have Theoline McCoy Primary School Year 1 class, and Island Primary Year 5 class. So thank you all for joining us, and a special shout out to Reefs Go Live biggest fan, Dario, who is also joining with his school today. Thank you guys very much for checking in with us, so you can continue to do that throughout the show. Any questions that you may have, be sure to send them in, and we're actually going to ask you some questions throughout the show so you can answer to us. So, if I could have a superpower, going back to my previous question, I would definitely choose the ability to be able to breathe underwater. That way I could go and explore everything in the ocean, and that would be really what I would love to do. How about you, Chandra? What superpower would you have?
Well, now that I think about it, I'd love the ability to see and glow in the dark, especially in the ocean. I think that would be really cool. So we're going to dive a little deeper into our topic and carry on exploring adaptations of the ocean. Now, Justine, would you be able to categorize some of the marine species, or explain how we categorize them?
Sure. So one of the most important differences between the organisms that we find in the ocean is their diet. So this means we can group these animals into categories depending on what they eat. For example, underwater creatures that feed on plants like algae or seagrass are called herbivores. And a good example of a herbivore is the green sea turtle. Now, these guys feed on seagrass, but another example of a good herbivore underwater is a damselfish. Now you may have seen them whilst you're out snorkeling in the ocean, and they fiercely protect their farmed patches of algae which they feed on. Chandra, can you see any herbivores down there?
I am seeing a couple of herbivores around here, Justine. I'm actually looking at some wrasse and some surgeonfish. Now, these herbivores are quite cool because they help the reef by grazing on these algae patches, as you've mentioned. And they actually assist by creating space for coral polyps to settle. Don't you think that's cool?
That's really cool, but actually herbivores aren't the only fish that we see on the reef. We also have carnivores. Now these are really important for keeping the balance in the ocean, as the carnivores are animals that feed on other animals. This includes species such as sharks, rays, barracuda, and Nassau grouper. These are all prominent species that we have here in the Cayman Islands, and these carnivores are really important predators as they play a key role in the food web by controlling the populations of herbivores. So another question for you, and so that is, if you can name a marine species and categorize it as either a herbivore or a carnivore. So let us know your answers and we'll read them out in a bit. But whilst you're doing that, I can actually read out some of your answers to which superpowers you would like to have. So let's have a little look. Okay, Janet would like to have camouflage. That's a really good one, and we may even talk a little bit more about that. Holly would like camouflage and speed. Well, you can't have everything, but it's good to see that you're excited about it. George from Texas would like change colors like a cephalopod. That's a really good one. We might even be able to talk about some of these adaptations during the show. We also have some more Grand Cayman schools joining us. So we have Clever Fish, Village Montessori, and East End Primary. So thank you guys for joining us. So we're going to go back to Chandra now in the down under the water and see what she has found down there.
So we haven't found anything cool to show you just of yet, but I loved hearing about all of our viewers' superpowers. I think they're pretty good, especially for living in the ocean. Now, Justine, we both mentioned herbivores and carnivores. There is another kind of category, and that is detritivores. So, detritivores are adapted to eat detritus. Now, detritus is the dead organic matter that is on the bottom of the seafloor, and a good example of this would be the conch. So a conch has adapted to eat the detritus on the seafloor, and it plays a vital role in the marine ecosystem because it helps recycle nutrients back into the food web, right, Justine?
Exactly. So thank you for that, Chandray. And we're also going to go back and see if you guys can name some of these herbivores or carnivores. Keep your texts coming through so we can see them. So there's a couple of people answering us, so thank you for that. We've also got some more shout-outs. So George and Nathaniel in Texas, hi to you guys. We have Richard in France and Marie-Paul in Canada. Thank you very much. We also have a couple of questions, so we can answer a couple of those for you now. So what is your favorite fish? This is a good one, and I don't want to give it away just yet because we're actually going to be talking about some of this in the episode. So you will hear a little later some of our favourite fish and some of our favourite creatures in general, and how long have CCMI been diving in Little Cayman. So CCMI has been in Little Cayman for quite a number of years. But we've been doing a project for 26 years on the reef, and we will hear more about this project later, so you can actually know some of the results of our diving. We have some people saying that a trumpetfish is a herbivore, a parrotfish is a herbivore, very good. Bluefin tuna is definitely a carnivore, and sharks are definitely carnivores. Thank you guys for your answers. These are really helpful, and thanks for communicating with us. Okay. So, now that we know a little bit more about how to group these animals into different food web categories, we can start to look at some of their actual adaptations that help them survive on the reef. So first, as someone previously mentioned and would like to have this superpower, we are going to talk about camouflage. So camouflage is when the colors, the markings, or the textures of an animal blend in with the background of the reef so that it's really difficult to see them. Some animals do this in order to avoid being eaten by predators, but also some predators actually use camouflage as a tool to stalk or hunt their prey. So, one more question. Can you guys name any cryptic creatures in the reef that use camouflage? And if you send in your answers, we may also talk about some of your favourites. Speaking of favourites, Chandray, what's your favourite cryptic creature that uses camouflage?
Well, my favorite cryptic creature is the master of the skies, and that is the octopus. Now, the most common octopus we get to see here in the Cayman Islands is the Brazilian reef octopus. So an octopus possesses chromatophores, and these are tiny pigment sacs that change color when stretched or retracted. They also have iridophores. Now, iridophores act as tiny mirrors, and an octopus uses both of these cells to either blending or communicate. Now, there is another adaptation, such like the long arm octopus uses, and this is where they actually contort their body to imitate a flounder underwater. Isn't that cool? What would your favorite creature be, Justine?
Well, okay, octopus are undoubtedly one of the most interesting creatures in the ocean, and they are very, very cool. But I'm actually a big fan of another species, which is the scorpion fish. So the scorpion fish, it is very well camouflaged, and it actually sits on corals or rocks, and it just waits for other smaller fish to swim by. And when a prey item appears in front of it, it uses its large gulper mouth to capture them. And it's so well camouflaged that it actually just looks like it would be a stone or a rock or a coral on the reef. So they are really effective as carnivores, but also they have venomous spines along their backs which help to keep predators away. And these spines are so venomous that they're actually extremely painful if humans touch them. So this is just another reason why when we are on the reef, we really shouldn't touch anything, because it may look like a rock, but it's actually a scorpion fish. So maybe they're not as cool as the octopus, but I still think they're pretty cool, don't you, Chandra?
I do. I think it's quite fascinating, and it's also interesting to compare how both of these species have adapted to surviving their individual environments. Now, these adaptations aren't just for fun tricks and games. They've evolved over years of evolution. Each pattern, each color change is all a result of countless generations that have learned to survive in the harsh environments. Right, Justine?
Exactly. And let's see how well you guys can identify some of these adaptations, because now it is time for a quiz. So, I am going to describe a cryptic creature, and I want to see if you can guess which one it is. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. So this creature is tiny and often overlooked, and it clings to the coral branches or the seagrass using its tail. Now, its delicate appearance and its natural disguise allows it to escape from hungry predators. And a really fun fact about this creature is that it's actually the male of the species that carries the babies. So, let's see if you can get it from these clues. If you think you know what it is, go ahead and shout out the answer right now. Let me know. Give you another couple seconds. If you know what it is, please do shout out. And whilst you do that, we're going to go down to Chandra and she can tell us the answer.
Okay, so if you guessed the seahorse, you're absolutely correct. Give yourself a round of applause. If you didn't, it's okay. There's always more opportunities to learn things about the ocean. Now, speaking of learning new things, we're going to switch over to Luna to see what she is finding. So, Luna is one of our camera operators underwater, and it may look like she's just looking at sand, but she's actually looking at cryptic creatures that may be hiding there. Oh, but she hasn't found any. That is okay. So that's one thing about the ocean, is that you never really know what you're going to find. But if we speak of sandy environments, we may be able to see things like jawfish and gobies and possibly decorator crabs. Now, these kind of animals have adapted to camouflage and blend into the sandy environment, and they use adaptations such as pale coloring, digging sandy burrows, and in instances like the decorator crab, they actually stick algae, sponges, and sometimes anemones onto their shells to disguise themselves. Don't you think that's pretty neat, Justine?
That's really cool. And although you weren't able to find anything this time, we are going to give our team a little bit more time to find some stuff, because they are very skilled at finding these creatures in the reef. So they're often hidden in the sand, but also amongst the sponges and the coral. So we'll let them root around a little bit and find some more for you today. And whilst they do that, we're going to go back to the chat to talk about some of your favorite creatures, and we've got some answers in here about creatures that use camouflage. So we've got the octopus, and we have already spoken about these guys. Nemo, I think you mean the clownfish. Yep, they do hide themselves amongst their anemones, but we don't actually found these clownfish here in the Caribbean. They are an Indo-Pacific species, so we won't see any of them today on the reef, unfortunately. Scorpionfish, well done for guessing that. We've already spoken about them. Rockfish are very similar to scorpionfish, but actually you really, really don't want to touch these because they are actually lethal and you can die from the venom. Flounder, that's a really, really good one. This is a very flat fish that we almost sometimes can't see when they're on the bottom of the sand until they move, and then you realize that it wasn't a patch of sand, it was actually a fish. Squid, these guys can change color similar to the octopus, and it makes them very difficult to see in the water. Angelfish and stingrays. Marie Martin Primary, thank you for sending in your ideas. Nudibranchs is another one, and that's very, very true. So we do have people who have told us about their favourite organisms as well, and sea slugs, such as nudibranch, is one that's coming in, and yes, exactly, that's a really good one, because this is actually a favourite of many divers, and that's probably because they are very difficult to find, but when you do find them, it's a real treat, because they're really beautiful and intricate creatures. The common species that we have here in Cayman Islands is the lettuce sea slug. So these guys, even though they are common, are really difficult to find because of how well camouflaged they are. Chandra, can you tell us a little bit more about them?
Love to. So a lettuce sea slug is a really neat creature, and it's a good example of tiny but mighty creatures here on the reef. Now, they are herbivores and they eat algae, and because of this they have a special adaptation. Now, this adaptation is where they take the green pigment from the algae, so that is called chlorophyll, and they use it to photosynthesize. This basically means that they can make their own energy from sunlight. Now, globally, there are over 3,000 species of marine environment, or 3,000 species of nudibranchs, and they all have different adaptations. It looks like Luna's trying to get my attention. Look, I think she's found something. Luna, what have you found?
Oh my God, Chandra! It looks like I found a Greglodon.
Oh my goodness, so now a Greglodon is a rare species indeed that only comes out when mischief is in the water. He is not a master of disguise, but rather a master of distraction. Oh no! He's just inked himself and swum away. Luna must have startled him.
Wow, Chandra, it seems like you're having a whale of a time down there getting to know all of these creatures, cryptic or not. But I don't want all of our viewers to feel like they're missing out, so it is time now for another quiz. On screen, you will see a close-up image of a creature on the reef. So, can you guess what it is? It has very distinct patterns, which is another technique for blending in with the background of the reef, such as the corals and the sponges. On the chat, you now have the chance to vote for which animal you think this pattern belongs to, so go ahead and vote. Do you think it is A, a Nassau grouper, B, a golden-tail moray eel, C, a Caribbean reef octopus, or D, a spotted sea hare? Please do let us know, and whilst you're doing that, let's check in with Chandra again, and maybe she'll even give you a little hint.
I love quizzes, Justine. So, after that Greglodon, Luna's gone back to looking for some more cryptic creatures for us. So, a hint on what the quiz might be is we find these guys swimming around in some tide pools, usually at night. So, I hope that gives you a better idea of how to answer. Justine, are you ready to reveal what it is?
I am indeed. So, looking at the chat to see if people have got it correct, we have some votes in, and we have a lot of votes for B, the golden-tail moray eel. So, if you said that it was B, the golden-tail moray eel, you are absolutely correct. Well done. Very good. Even more votes coming in now after I've revealed the answer. We'll still count these, though. Don't you worry. Well done, guys. Everybody seems to have guessed it correctly. Very proud of you. I'm glad. So, the eel itself may not be so cryptic as it's not that small. However, they are really good at hiding in between the crevices of the reef, making them very elusive. So when we're diving, we might not find them. And often the reason that we don't see some of these animals whilst we're in the ocean is just because they are so good at hiding themselves between the corals or the sponges. So, Chandra, can you see any animals down there hiding in the sponges?
I am, Justine. I'm busy looking for some pretty cool sponges right now. And I seem to have found a really big-ish, smallish or medium-sized barrel sponge. And there's a little juvenile wrasse swimming around. So that's really cool because these animals show how they all work together. So the gobies, or wrasses for instance, rely on a sponge for protection. And then they would the sponge would then rely on the wrasse to help keep it clean of parasites. So since I found the sponge, I think it would be pretty cool if I can demonstrate what exactly sponges do in the ocean. Now, they are very effective filter feeders, and it currently looks like it's not doing anything. It's just sitting there on the reef for decoration. But they are filtering and processing hundreds of liters of water a day. Now, what happens is water is taken in through the sponge wall, and is it expelled through the top of the sponge, which is known as the osculum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to squirt some non-toxic dye known as fluorescein around the base of the sponge, and we hopefully get to see how this happens. We're just going to have to give it a couple of seconds to process. Let's see if we can... Oh, there we go. We got a little Russ coming around here to have a look at what we're doing. Oh, there we go. So, you can see over here that the dye is going through the wall of the sponge and expelling through the top. This is a great example of how these creatures seem like they're doing absolutely nothing, but they're really playing a vital role in the environment. Don't you think that was cool, Justine?
Really cool. Thank you so much for showing us that, Chandra. That was really interesting to see. But I don't want any of you guys to try and do this yourselves, because our team here at CCMI are very specially trained in underwater demonstrations like this and scientific diving, so that whilst we are doing these things, we make sure to protect the reef at the same time. So don't try this at home. But as you said, Chandra, sponges are very important to the ecosystem, and actually every single aspect of the reef is really important to maintaining the overall survival and health of the ecosystem. That's why here at CCMI we are conducting our monitoring program on the health of the reefs around Little Cayman. And now that you've met some of these cryptic creatures, we can learn how and why we need to monitor them. And we monitor them, the health of the reef, and record it over a long time so that we can see the changes, especially as the oceans and the climate are changing. So as ocean temperatures rise and as the conditions change, this long-term data really helps scientists see how the reefs are affected and allows them to find ways to protect them. So, virtual dive buddies, can you think of what information we might measure when we're reef health? What things do you think we monitor when we're doing this program? Let us know your answers in the chat and we'll read them out and see if you're correct. And whilst you do that, Chandra, can you tell us a little bit more about CCMI's Healthy Reefs program?
I'd love to. So CCMI and our researchers have been monitoring these reefs for 26 years, and they've been doing this using something called the AGRA protocol. Now, AGRA stands for Atlantic and Gulf Rapid Reef Assessment Protocol. So what they do is they go out and survey and kind of calculate and see how healthy the reefs are by looking at coral cover, if the reef is clean or not, and kind of what the fish populations are doing on that. Isn't that right, Justine?
Absolutely correct. And so looking at if you guys have sent any guesses in, we'll give you a little bit more time to decide what you think we measure. We do have someone here that says, do you measure things like cryptic creatures such as crabs? Well, we don't actually measure these cryptic creatures simply because they can be so hard to find and then really difficult to count accurately. So instead of looking at these species, the scientists choose to look at species that are going to tell us more about the overall health of the reef itself. And that's why in the AGRA protocol, we do have someone who said that Becky says how healthy the coral is, and that's a really good idea, Becky. Thank you for sending in your messages. But actually, the answer that we look at is 4 different key metrics. So we look at coral cover, coral composition, fish populations, and algae. So we're going to go through these all one by one. Chandra, can you kick us off?
Sure. So the first thing we're going to look at is coral cover. Now, coral cover is where we calculate or measure the percentage of reef that is covered by living coral. Now, generally, the more coral cover there is, the healthier the coral reef will be. So let's take an example. If we look at this part of the reef over here, just a small bit, we can see that there is a low coral cover. Now this helps our researchers kind of understand and see if there are any indicators such as disease or bleaching. Justine, can you explain the next metric for us, please?
Of course. So the next thing we look at is then coral composition, because not all corals are the same. This means that we look at which species are there and how they change over time, as there have been some shifts lately in the coral composition, and this is because some of the coral species are more tolerant of the changes, whereas others are struggling a lot more as the oceans change. So therefore, the type of coral and the coral composition together determine what is actually able to live on the reef. And this leads us to our next metric, which is fish populations. And this is the next thing we measure. Chandra, can you tell us what we look at with this?
Sure. So when we do our fish population surveys, our researchers go out and identify the different species of fish on the reef. Now, they don't just identify the species. They also count individuals and estimate their sizes. And this kind of indicates how healthy the reefs are, because if we identify many herbivores, that will indicate that there is a healthier reef. This is because herbivores play a vital role in grazing on algae and keeping algae from overgrowing. And this helps our coral reefs thrive.
Yes, and speaking of algae, this is the last thing that we measure. So we look at how much algae is on the reef, as often too much algae is a bad thing. This is because maybe there aren't enough fish around that can eat the algae, or maybe the corals are also struggling to grow, so the algae actually takes over on the reef. Now, the scientists measure this to ensure if there is balance or not on the reef. And by measuring these 4 things, CCMI can really see if the reefs are staying healthy or if they need more protection. Chandra, can you tell us a little bit more about some of our findings?
I would love to tell us more. So what we do is we put together a Healthy Reefs report card, just like this one from 2023. Now, what happens with this is our researchers take all the data we've gathered with the Agro Protocol, and they're able to make a report card just like the ones you get at school. But instead of grades and classes, we are looking at health on reefs. Oh, and there's Greg making another appearance with us. Justine, can you carry on for us?
Sure, I guess the master of distraction is distracting you guys down there a bit too much, but that's all good. So, going back to our healthy reefs, so before 2023, most of the reefs around Little Cayman were actually classified as in either good or very good condition. This meant the coral cover was actually the highest it's been in 26 years, and the high species diversity and high fish populations were also there to show this. So the fish number and the fish sizes had gradually been increasing over the previous 5 to 6 years. But Chandra, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what happened after this.
So, we noticed a significant change after the 2023 bleaching event. Your reef-building corals and stony corals, like your lettuce corals and finger corals, took a significant decline in population size and overall health. This is attributed to the fact that they are a rapid-growing coral, and it makes them more sensitive to environmental change. Now, your other stony corals, like boulder corals, they were able to remain relatively stable. And this is because their slower growth made them more tolerant towards environmental change.
So There is actually some hope, though, for Little Cayman, as historically the reefs here have been really strong. Unlike some other areas around the globe, there are low human impacts here, such as pollution, overfishing, and coastal development. So this means that they do have a chance of recovering and bouncing back, thankfully. And that's why our Healthy Reefs monitoring program is so important, because without it, we wouldn't know if the reefs are bleaching, if they're recovering, or if they're staying healthy. Now, speaking of healthy, let's check back in with our team to see if they're all doing okay down there, and check if they're all okay on air. Give us a little update of how you're doing, guys.
Well, we're starting to run pretty low on air, Justine, but we are doing swell. We should be coming up pretty soon. So I'll probably say bye from our side, but before we do that, let's quickly summarize what we did today, or what we learned. So we went over some cryptic creatures, and we had the opportunity to see a few of them in their natural environment. We also got to see we got to see a Healthy Reef report card, which comes from all the surveys that our researchers do using the AGRA protocol. And then we also got to understand a few adaptations of the cryptic creatures and what helps them survive. Does that sum it up, Justine?
That pretty much covers everything, I think. So I hope you all have learned a lot today, and you're now on your way to becoming real-life coral scientists. If you want to send in some more questions, this will be your last chance, so please do send those in now. We have a couple of more minutes now for that. I'm going to check the chat to see if anybody does have any questions or if I've missed anything. We did have a lot of people, by the way, who got the seahorse quiz right as well, so thank you guys for sending that in, as well as the moray eel quiz. I'm really proud of you guys for doing that. There is a question here from Island Primary that says, are any fish omnivores? Well, yes, so omnivores are organisms that eat multiple things. So a lot of fish down there that I'm sure Chandra is seeing are going to be omnivores. That means that they can eat a mixture of other animals as well as what herbivores eat, like plants underwater. So the parrotfish, for example, is technically an omnivore, because not only does it eat the algae off of the corals, they also have a very sharp mouth, which also allows them to eat the corals themselves. So they will actually eat the living tissue of the coral, which is an animal. We have some more questions. So, does bleaching kill the coral, or can they recover? Well, bleaching is when the microscopic algae, the zooxanthellae that lives inside the corals, leaves, and this is as a stress response to the high temperatures or pollution or to disease. So this doesn't technically mean that the coral is dead. When we see it white and we say that it's bleached, it can be a very bad thing, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily dead. We're just seeing the skeleton underneath through the tissues. However, what we're seeing more likely these days is that the stress event will be for a long time. If the stress event leaves quickly, then the zooxanthellae can go back into the coral's tissue and it will recover. But if the stress event is for multiple weeks, then unfortunately the corals will not be able to feed themselves, because the zooxanthellae actually give energy to the corals, and over time they will essentially starve and die, unfortunately. But when we see corals bleach, it's not necessarily meaning they're dead, so they can recover. What is the current water temperature? So I'm on the boat, I'm dry and I'm hot, but I do have someone telling me what the current water temperature is. Oh, in Fahrenheit, which I actually don't understand because I am from England, so if someone could tell me. Is that 71? 81, so if anyone can translate that into Celsius. I don't know. And how do you know how to find underwater creatures? Well, as I said, that these guys have different adaptations. They also have very different niches within the environment. So some organisms are quite easy to find if you know where to look for them. Such as we can find shrimp that have very specific organisms that they're related to. For example, the Peterson shrimp you can usually find around corkscrew anemones. So if you ever want to find some Peterson shrimp, it's easier to find a corkscrew anemone and then look inside it. And then there's also some nudibranchs that have a favorite food, which could be a specific sponge. So you can look for the sponge species and then you can find the organism that is on there. So that's a good way of finding it, and if not, then you just look really, really hard and concentrate in the same place for a long time. Let's look at some more questions. What is the most dangerous species from Prospect Primary? Well, if we're talking about in the ocean, there's a couple of dangerous species. If we're talking about in the world, we might say humans. But if we're looking in the ocean, then you don't need to worry about most species. If you stay away from them and if you don't touch anything, then you are safe. But as I said about the scorpion fish, that's probably the most dangerous one that you don't want to touch when you're around these reefs. So that's why we don't touch anything. So I think that is about all we have time for questions today, as we're running out of time on the broadcast. But on behalf of CCMI, I want to thank you all for joining us. And at the moment, you can see a QR code that should appear on your screen. So please do be sure to fill out our post-broadcast survey. You can do that via the QR code or via the link that should have been sent to you. So thank you for doing that, and please do tune in for our next episode, which will be on the 9th of May, and we will be looking at endangered corals, finding and restoring our coral species. It's goodbye from me, and goodbye for the topside hosts, and maybe we can go down to the divers on their safety stop to say a quick little goodbye if they still have some air.
And just to answer your previous question, Justine, it's 27 degrees Celsius down here.
Thank you, Justine.
So nice and toasty, but we're happy you guys could join us, and thank you for joining us on this Cryptic Creature adventure. And we hope to see you guys next time. Goodbye from all of us.